My husband cheated and took everything. So I bought the hotel he was staying in. They say black love is magic. That when two people rise together, build something real, something lasting, it becomes unstoppable. I believed that. For 10 years I believed it with all my heart. My name is Jasmine Daniels, and for most of my 30s, I thought I was living in the fairy tale version of a strong, successful black power couple love story. My husband, Marcus, and I were the kind of couple people pointed to as goals. On Instagram, we were polished smiles at charity galas, romantic vacations in the Maldives, and Sunday brunches in tailored fits with matching gold watches. In real life we were something much more complicated. Marcus was charming in that smooth, architect, on the rise kind of way. He always knew how to command a room without raising his voice. People loved him because he made them feel important. And I loved him because he made me believe in us. We met at an art opening in Midtown, where I was scouting design ideas for a hotel client. He was presenting one of his firm's new building models. We locked eyes over wine and sculpture, and just like that, a spark turned into a flame. I was already doing well for myself. My interior design company, JD Spaces, had been featured in 2 magazines, and I had a reputation for transforming luxury properties with bold, modern Afrocentric flair. But Marcus added something else to my life, a sense of home. Or so I thought. We bought a 3-story brownstone in Inman Park. Brick on the outside, marble and hardwood on the inside. I poured my soul into designing every inch of it, blending warm wood tones with vibrant colors, African art, and custom furniture pieces that told our story. Our bedroom ceiling was hand-painted with Ghanaian symbols for strength and endurance. I thought that meant something. From the outside, everything was perfect, but the thing about perfection is, it's often a performance. And I didn't know the curtain was already starting to fall. It started small. Marcus began coming home later than usual, claiming he had client meetings or firm deadlines. I believed him. His firm had just landed a major contract designing a mixed-use complex downtown. He was proud, and I was proud of him. We were both ambitious, and ambition demands sacrifice. At least that's what we told each other. Then came the silence. The distance. The way he'd scroll through his phone with the screen tilted just enough that I couldn't see it. The way he stopped reaching for me in bed. The random irritability, like me asking how his day went, was suddenly a loaded question. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong. I tried to talk to him about it. One night over dinner. Takeout, because neither of us had cooked in weeks. I asked, "Are we okay?" Marcus didn't look up from his phone. Of course. Why wouldn't we be? "You've just been different lately." He finally glanced up, his expression unreadable. "I've been busy, Jas. You know that. Work's been hell." "I know. But I'm your wife. I don't feel like I'm part of your world anymore." He let out a sigh, the kind that feels heavier than words. "You're overthinking. I'm here, aren't I?" But he wasn't. Not really. Still, I brushed it off. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe I was being paranoid. I blamed stress, the economy, Mercury in retrograde, anything but what my gut was screaming. Then came the real blow. It was a Tuesday. I'll never forget that. I had just wrapped a client consultation and decided to surprise Marcus with lunch at his office. I had his favorite jerk chicken from Miss Shirley's, with a side of rice and plantains. I even brought one of those fancy teas he liked, the kind that cost $6 a bottle. I told the receptionist I was just dropping something off. She smiled awkwardly and buzzed me through. I walked down the hallway toward Marcus's office, and froze. His door was slightly ajar. Inside he was sitting behind his desk, laughing with a woman who looked like she had just walked out of an Instagram influencer's feed. She had perfect skin, a high ponytail, and a body-hugging dress that didn't scream on turn, the way Marcus had introduced her weeks ago at a firm event. Then I saw her lean in, too close. Her hand brushed his. He didn't pull away. In fact, he leaned in too. I couldn't breathe. I left the food on the desk in the break room and walked out before either of them saw me. My heels clicked louder than usual on the polished floors. The air outside hit me like a slap. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, trying to convince myself I hadn't just seen what I saw. But I had. And I knew my marriage was falling apart. That night, Marcus didn't come home. No call, no text, just silence. When he finally walked in the next morning, I was waiting in the living room. "Where were you?" I asked calmly, though everything in me was burning. "Working late. I crashed at a hotel downtown." He blinked. Just once. Then looked away. "Don't start this. I saw you, Marcus. I went to your office. I saw you with her." His jaw tightened. "You shouldn't have come by unannounced." That was all he said. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "It's not what it looks like." Just blame, like I had broken some unspoken rule by catching him in the act. That moment shifted everything. In the weeks that followed, he became colder, more withdrawn. He started moving money out of our accounts. Slowly at first, then more aggressively. I didn't notice until I got a call from our mortgage lender saying a payment had bounced. I checked our finances. My heart sank. He had cleaned me out. He had gone behind my back, filed paperwork to transfer our jointly owned business assets into his name, used a forged signature to sell the studio space I had worked in for 5 years, and even tried to claim our home was his sole property. Citing some technicality buried in the deed, I was blindsided, betrayed not just emotionally, but financially. He didn't just cheat on me, he tried to erase me. Everything we built together, he tried to claim as his own. He thought I would break, he thought I would go quietly. But he forgot one thing: I built myself once, I could do it again. And this time, I'd make sure he saw it. The first time I said Marcus's name out loud after everything, it felt foreign. Like saying the name of someone I used to know, someone who died. And in a way he did. The man I married, the man I built a life with, no longer existed. What was left in his place was a stranger in an expensive suit, who used love as a weapon and partnership as a cover for control. It was like he had been planning this for months. No, years. I found documents in our home office tucked away in a drawer I rarely opened. Legal papers, bank transfers, a fake consulting agreement where he listed me as an inactive partner. There were shell companies I'd never heard of, one of which had somehow bought my share in JD Spaces. All forged, all signed with my name in ink I didn't hold. I stared at the papers with a mixture of rage and disbelief. I had trusted him so completely, blindly. We didn't have a prenup because I thought love was enough. And when the divorce papers came, slid into my inbox like some cruel newsletter, he was asking for everything. Everything. The house, the cars, the remaining business assets, even the art I had curated over years from black artists across the diaspora. Pieces with stories, with soul. He listed them as joint property, to be sold and split. But I knew the truth. He wanted to sell them because he knew how much they meant to me. What made it worse was how calm he was through it all. When we met at the mediator's office, he didn't flinch. He walked in with his lawyer, a smug little man with 2 white teeth and a patent leather briefcase, and sat across from me like I was an inconvenient meeting on his calendar. I, on the other hand, was unraveling. "You're really going to do this?" I asked him in that sterile, fluorescent, lit room. He looked at me, eyes blank. "It's just business, Jasmine. Don't make it personal. Business. Our marriage was not a merger. My heart was not a liability." But Marcus had made his decision. He had chosen his image, his ambition, and whatever fantasy he had with that girl. Tiana, I learned later. To replace the life we'd built. The courts didn't care about betrayal. They cared about paperwork. And Marcus had stacked his deck like a man who never intended to play fair. I walked away from the settlement with barely enough to cover a few months' rent. I lost the studio. I lost the house. I lost my clients, many of whom Marcus had quietly poached or convinced to stay silent. It was like being erased from my own life. For a while, I stayed with my mama in Decatur. She didn't ask many questions. She didn't have to. One look at my face when I showed up at her door with a suitcase, and she just opened her arms. We sat on her porch with sweet tea and silence, the kind that says more than words ever could. "You gonna let this man steal your fire, baby?" She asked me one night, as the cicadas hummed in the dark. I didn't answer. I didn't know how to. But her words settled deep in my chest like a seed, and slowly, day by day, I started to feel the ache of what I had lost transform into something else, something sharper, something hotter. Anger, not bitterness. A quiet, focused anger that demanded to be used, not wasted. That was when I knew I wasn't going to let Marcus win. He thought he had destroyed me. He thought he had burned it all down. But he forgot something important. I was the blueprint. He wouldn't have had any of this, clients, taste, reputation, without me. I elevated him. I built a home where he could thrive. I turned him into someone the world respected. And now that he had taken everything, I was going to rebuild it. Not in his shadow. Not with his help. On my terms. From the ground up. But first, I had to understand just how deep the betrayal went. Through a mutual friend still working in the design scene, I found out that Marcus hadn't just started seeing Tiana recently. They had been together for nearly a year. He had even taken her on one of our work trips to Paris last spring. I had stayed behind to finish a project. I had kissed him goodbye at the airport and told him to bring me back macarons. He brought her instead. It wasn't just infidelity. It was layers upon layers of lies. I tried to confront him one last time, more for closure than anything else. I texted him to meet at the cafe we used to love in West End. He actually agreed. He showed up 10 minutes late in a new designer suit, smelling like sandalwood and arrogance. "Wow," he said, looking me over like I was a distant cousin he barely remembered. "You look tired." I ignored the jab. "You didn't have to do it like this, Marcus." He sipped his espresso. "You always were too emotional. I built everything with you." "No," he said with a small smirk. "You helped. I built it. I just stopped carrying dead weight." That moment shattered something in me. Not my heart, it had already been broken. But the last flicker of guilt I had about walking away. This man didn't just betray me. He erased me on purpose. He wanted to climb without me, and now he was standing at the top of a mountain I helped him build, pretending he made the climb alone. But if he thought I was done, he had another thing coming. A few days later, I got a phone call from Monique, a friend in real estate who owed me a favor. She had just taken on a property downtown, a boutique hotel that had fallen into financial trouble. The owners were looking to sell quietly, preferably to someone local. "It needs work," she warned me, "but it's got good bones. And the location, killer." Something in my spirit stirred. "What's the name of the hotel?" I asked. There was a pause on the line. "The Whitmore," she said. "Heard your ex is living there full time now with his little assistant." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "How soon can we talk numbers?" The Whitmore. I'd driven past it dozens of times without really noticing it. A 5-story boutique hotel tucked between high-end condos and vegan cafes in the heart of downtown Atlanta. The kind of place that marketed urban luxury and black excellence, with mood lighting, curated playlists, and overpriced cocktails. Now it was a holding cell for my ex-husband and his intern-turned-girlfriend. The irony almost made me laugh. Monique set up a private walkthrough the next day. I wore all black, not for fashion but for armor. Head high, chin sharp. I wasn't just scouting a property, I was scouting the battlefield. And I wanted every ghost of Marcus's arrogance to feel me walk through that lobby. The Whitmore was beautiful once, you could tell. Crown molding, original tilework, bold architectural bones. But now it had a tired, faded elegance. Like someone had dressed it up but forgotten to care for it. It was trying to keep up appearances, and failing. It reminded me of my marriage. The elevator creaked as I rode up to the penthouse suite. Marcus was living up there, according to Monique. Long-term guest, full privacy, billing under a business account. He was hiding in plain sight. Living like he'd won. Like he'd taken everything and walked away clean. I didn't knock. I didn't announce myself. I didn't want him to know anything. I kept my eyes on the building. The wear in the lobby carpet. The outdated lighting. The cheap art on the walls. This hotel didn't just need love, it needed vision. And I had plenty of that. "You serious about this?" Monique asked as we stood in the rooftop lounge. The skyline stretched wide and glittering in front of us. It was beautiful, yes, but it could be more. A rooftop restaurant, a cocktail garden, a private event space. I saw it all unfolding in my mind like a design rendering. I nodded. "I'm beyond serious." We sat down that night and started crunching numbers. The Whitmore was in trouble, bad investments, bad management, and an owner who was desperate to cut losses and walk away quietly. The timing was perfect. All I needed was financing. I was broke, but I wasn't broken. I still had my name, my reputation, and my Rolodex of clients and contacts. People who knew my work and respected me, even if Marcus had tried to sabotage that. I called a few of them. Black women investors, real estate partners, art collectors I'd designed for. And pitched them a visions. A luxury boutique hotel that celebrated black culture, art, and excellence in every detail. Bold interiors, curated vibes. A destination, not just a stay, and slowly they began to say yes. Not everyone, of course. Some gave polite no's. A few ghosted me. But enough said yes that I pulled together the capital I needed. I formed an LLC, JDN Holdings, and put Monique on the paperwork as my public-facing agent. Marcus wouldn't see my name anywhere. That was intentional. I didn't want revenge. I wanted something better. Power. The sale went through on a gray Thursday morning. It rained hard that day, like the sky knew I was washing something off me. When the email came through, ownership transfer, the Whitmore Hotel. I stared at it for a long time. Then I poured myself a glass of red wine and played Solange's Cranes in the Sky, on full volume. I cried, not because I was sad, but because I had survived. What followed was chaos, the good kind. Renovations, planning, hiring staff who believed in the vision. Replacing every bland piece of furniture with bold, intentional designs. I filled the space with color and soul. Custom murals by local black artists, African textiles, rich woods, modern lines. It was unapologetically us, every inch of it. No more sterile hotel rooms. No more generic artwork. This wasn't just a hotel. This was a statement. Marcus was still living there, of course. Still strutting around like he owned the place. Still booking penthouse dinners and private meetings with his new girl at the rooftop lounge. Which I now technically owned. He had no idea what was coming, and I wasn't going to tell him. Not yet. I wanted him to be comfortable. I wanted him to get used to thinking he was safe, settled, on top. I wanted him to feel untouchable. Right up until the moment he realized he was standing in a house I built. And this time, he wouldn't be able to tear it down. Because this house, it belonged to me. Power is a funny thing. For years I thought Marcus had it. He was loud in his success, always shaking hands, taking meetings, collecting accolades. But real power doesn't announce itself. Real power walks in the room and doesn't have to explain a thing. And the day I walked into the Whitmore as its new owner, keys in hand and vision in mind, I realized that everything Marcus took from me had only made room for something greater. I wasn't just rebuilding, I was evolving. The first order of business was reclaiming space. Not just physically, but energetically. The hotel felt stale, hollow, like it had been waiting for someone to wake it up. I started with the lobby. Gone were the faded beige walls and soulless generic prints. I replaced them with bold color palettes, deep emerald green, warm terracotta, vibrant navy, and artwork from local black painters, sculptors, and photographers. I wanted people to walk into the Whitmore and feel something: pride, elegance, identity. I hired a Ghanaian, American muralist named Kweku to paint a floor-to-ceiling piece behind the front desk. An abstract portrait of black joy rising like fire. The air shifted. So did the staff. I let go of most of the old management. They were indifferent, mostly men who had run the place like it was a tax write-off. I brought in a new team, hospitality pros with soul, people who saw this as more than just a job. Young black chefs, queer creatives. Southern aunties who could run a front desk like it was the floor of the NYSE. We weren't just building a hotel. We were building a sanctuary. I renamed the rooftop lounge, Eshu. A nod to the Yoruba deity of crossroads and transformation. Because that's exactly what the space was for me. I installed new lighting, curated a cocktail menu with all black-owned spirits, and brought in live musicians on weekends. Jazz trios, spoken word artists, Afrobeat DJs. It was culture on the rooftop, vibe after vibe. Guests started coming, then influencers, then press. The Whitmore became the spot. And Marcus, still clueless. Every day he walked through that lobby, past my vision, under my murals, through my reclaimed walls, and didn't even know it. He still thought he was untouchable. He still thought this hotel was his little safe haven. A place where he could parade his new girl around, conduct his shady business deals, and pretend the world revolved around him. He didn't realize the world had shifted. Because I had shifted it. One morning, I was standing in the back hallway with my general manager, Tasha, mid-discussion about event bookings, when I heard his voice. Marcus, deep, smooth, familiar in the worst kind of way. He was at the front desk, arguing with the concierge about a suit extension. Annoyed that his usual request hadn't been automatically approved. He's been here so long he thinks he owns the place, Tasha whispered. I smiled. Let him. It wasn't time yet. I wasn't ready to reveal myself. Not until the final renovation was complete. The penthouse. I had left it untouched strategically. I wanted it to be the last thing I transformed. The final reclaiming of space Marcus had treated like his personal palace. I timed it carefully, waiting until the exact date his extended lease expired. I instructed Tasha not to inform him until the day of. That morning I sent in my design team. 2 hours later, Marcus came storming down the stairs. Tiana trailing behind him in a robe and slippers. What the hell is going on? He barked at the front desk. Tasha stayed calm, polite. I'm sorry, Mr. Daniels, but your stay was only guaranteed through the 15th. The owner is beginning renovations on the suite today. He blinked. The owner. Wes, she said, then added with a smile, she sends her regards. His face changed, confused, suspicious, and then it clicked, just a flicker of realization. He turned and looked around the lobby for the first time, not just through it but at it. The paintings, the light fixtures, the layout. It was me. He knew it. I watched from the shadows behind the tinted glass office door as he stood there. No words, just silence. He looked like a man watching his world tilt. Because it was. He had stolen everything from me, and I bought the building he was sleeping in. Later that week, I finally let him see me. It was a Friday night. The rooftop was buzzing. Jazz floating in the air, candles flickering on linen-draped tables, the smell of Cajun shrimp and honey bourbon wafting from the kitchen. I stepped onto the rooftop like a queen returning to her throne. Marcus saw me instantly. He was in the corner, with Tiana, a half-finished cocktail in his hand. She was laughing. He wasn't. Not anymore. I walked past their table without a word. My dress was gold. My smile was sharper than glass. And for the first time in a year, I felt it fully. Not just survival, victory. He stood as I passed, like he might say something. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. I had already said everything I needed to say with brick, tile, paint, and power. I reclaimed myself. And now, the city would know my name. I always believed in the power of quiet moves, silent steps, private wins. Let your work speak before your words ever need to, but sometimes you need the world to know exactly who you are and what you've done. And this was one of those times. The renovations at the Whitmore were finally complete, top to bottom. From the penthouse to the basement lounge, every inch of the building had been reborn. It wasn't just a luxury boutique hotel anymore. It was a cultural institution. A living, breathing expression of black brilliance, curated and built by the very woman Marcus thought he had erased. It was time to make it known. So I threw a grand reopening gala. Black tie, art installation, live band VP guest list, media coverage, influencers and investors and taste makers from across the South all packed into the newly redesigned Whitmore to toast a new era. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was who the new owner was. I had kept that information quiet until the very last second. Even the press release Monique sent out only hinted. An Atlanta-born visionary steps into hospitality with a bold reimagining of downtown luxury. That could have been anyone. Until the lights dimmed. Until the band played their final note. Until the host, my good friend and restaurateur, turned MC, Deja Langston, stepped onto the small stage set up in the rooftop lounge. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, voice strong and steady over the hum of champagne and whispered speculation. "Thank you for joining us tonight. You've witnessed something special, more than a hotel launch. This is a homecoming, a renaissance." She paused, smiled. "And now, I'd like to introduce the woman who made it all happen. Atlanta's own, visionary, designer, curator of this magic, the owner of the Whitmore." A breathless silence swept the rooftop. Jasmine Danielle Nichols. The crowd erupted, applause, gasps, faces turned, cameras flashed. But all I saw was him, Marcus. He was standing near the back, glass in hand, eyes wide. Tiana was frozen beside him, caught mid-sip. The blood drained from his face. I stepped into the spotlight, calm, smiling, radiant in a midnight blue gown that hugged my body like armor. The applause kept going, but I didn't hear it. All I heard was my own heartbeat. Strong, steady, unapologetic. I took the mic. "Thank you," I said, voice carrying through the air like silk dipped in steel. "A year ago I lost almost everything, my home, my business, my name. People said I was finished. But when everything is taken from you, you learn to build something they can't touch." I scanned the crowd. Let my eyes land right on Marcus. "You learn that your power doesn't come from who you were with. It comes from who you become." The applause came again. This time thunderous. I turned away from Marcus and toward my people. The black artists. The chefs. The front desk staff in sleek black uniforms. The architects and builders who had turned sketches into space. They were the real victory. They were the ones who mattered. Because I hadn't just bought a hotel. I built a legacy. The next morning, the story broke across Atlanta. Black woman buys and rebuilds boutique hotel, where her ex was living with his mistress. From betrayed to bossed up, Jasmine Nichols turns pain into power. Blogs ran with it. TikTok lit up. Journalists called me a phoenix, a mogul, a miracle. But they didn't know the half of it. Marcus tried to call me 3 times. I didn't answer. Then he emailed. Subject: "We need to talk." I deleted it. There was nothing left to say. Tiana left the hotel a week later. Rumor was she had no idea Marcus didn't own it anymore. When she found out, she packed up her designer bags and peeled out of the Valet Circle in a rented Benz. I watched from the 4th floor window, sipping espresso and smiling. Marcus checked out shortly after that, quietly, like a man slipping away from a party he wasn't invited to, and just like that he was gone. But I was still here, standing taller than ever. There's a moment after the dust settles, after the war is won, the papers are signed, the applause fades, when silence returns, and in that stillness, you find out who you really are. For me, that moment came 2 weeks after the grand reopening. The buzz had cooled, journalists stopped calling, the influencers moved on to the next hot rooftop. But the Whitmore, it was steady, solid, bookings were up, reviews glowed, and the staff was starting to feel like family. But deep inside, something in me still felt unsettled. Not because of Marcus. He was a chapter I'd closed. But because I hadn't yet faced the version of myself I became during the fall. The hurt, humiliated, desperate Jasmine who once sat on the cold marble floor of an empty condo, gripping divorce papers with shaking hands. She still lived inside me, buried beneath the silk gowns and power meetings and perfectly composed smiles. She wasn't loud anymore, but she was there. And if I didn't face her, I'd never fully heal. That Friday, I decided to do something I hadn't done in months. I took the day off. No emails, no site visits, no staff meetings. I told Tasha to run the show and left my phone in the suite. I got in my car and drove. No destination, just streets and sun and something unplanned. My hands on the wheel, my heart in my throat. I ended up back where it all began. Our old neighborhood. The tree-lined cul-de-sac where Marcus and I had bought our first home. The red brick colonial we thought would be our forever. The place we hosted dinner parties, planned a nursery, fought over paint colors, made up in the shower. That house, it had new owners now. Young couple. 2 Teslas in the driveway, baby swing hanging from the porch beam. I parked across the street and sat for a long while, just watching. Letting the memories roll through me like film, grainy, bright, bittersweet. I remembered the night he first told me he loved me. Right there on the front steps. I remembered the night I knew he didn't anymore. Same place, different silence. Funny how love and loss can share the same setting. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. I just sat, calm, still, until the breeze shifted and I felt something lift. And that's when I finally realized. I wasn't broken anymore. I wasn't angry either. I was just free. That night I returned to the Whitmore different. Lighter. Tasha met me in the lobby. "You've got a visitor." I raised an eyebrow. "Investor." She hesitated. "No, him." I sighed. Not because I was surprised, but because I was ready. Marcus was sitting in the courtyard, beneath the soft glow of Edison lights strung between trees. He wore one of his signature suits, navy with a crisp white shirt, no tie. Hair trimmed, jaw tight. Like he was still trying to present himself as someone important. I walked over slowly, deliberate. Sat across from him. Crossed my legs. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once, he didn't seem to know what to say. So I helped him out. "You got 5 minutes. He blinked. "That's it. Use them wisely." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I came to say something I should have said a long time ago. I waited. "I'm sorry. I didn't react. Not at first. I didn't just hurt you," he went on. "I tried to erase you. I let my ego convince me that I was the engine behind everything we built. But it was you were the vision, the backbone. And I was afraid of how much I needed you." I tilted my head. "And when you realized that you slept with your intern," he winced. "I was stupid. I know, but seeing what you've done, seeing this place, it made me realize what I destroyed." I studied him. For once, Marcus Daniels looked small. "I don't need your apology," I said quietly. "Not because it doesn't matter, but because I've already forgiven you." He looked up, surprised. "I forgave you," I repeated. "So you'd stop renting space in my head." "Not for you, for me." He nodded, swallowing the moment. "But don't confuse forgiveness with reconciliation," I added. "We're not friends. We're not business partners. We're not anything." Silence settled between us. Then he said, "You won." I smiled. "There was no game. You lost when you stopped valuing me. I won the moment I started valuing myself." That hit him harder than any insult could have. He stood, slow and uncertain. "Well, if you ever need anything." I cut him off gently. "I won't." He gave a small nod. "Goodbye, Jasmine. Goodbye, Marcus." And just like that, he walked out of my life again. Only this time, I didn't break, I bloomed. Back upstairs, I stood on the rooftop of the Whitmore, barefoot now, the Atlanta skyline stretching wide and glittering before me. My city, my sanctuary, my soul poured into 5 stories of reclaimed space. I thought about all the women who had messaged me since the grand reopening. Survivors of heartbreak, betrayal, failure. Women who saw themselves in my story, who felt seen, empowered, unhidden, and I realized something. This wasn't just my comeback, it was an invitation. To every woman who's ever been told she was too emotional, too ambitious, too loud, too much. To every woman who's ever been torn down by someone who once called her love. To every woman starting over with nothing but a dream and a cracked, open heart. This was for us. The days after Marcus walked out of the Whitmore for the final time felt like standing in the middle of a sunrise. There was a golden stillness in the air. Not loud, not triumphant. Just warm, soft, sure. I wasn't celebrating anymore. I wasn't proving anything. I was simply existing in the life I had built with my own 2 hands. And that, more than anything, was peace. The phone stopped ringing with old ghosts. The press calmed down. The city, which had briefly turned my story into a headline, had moved on to new drama. But I hadn't moved on. I had rooted myself deeper. Each morning started the same, now coffee brewed in the suite above the penthouse, a quiet walk through the lobby, and a small journal I kept by the rooftop garden, where I wrote 10 things I was grateful for. Sometimes the gratitude was big, like partnerships with Black-owned vineyards who now supplied our wine list. Other times, it was small, like the way my new concierge, Darnell, smoothed his tie in the mirror before every shift, or how the art curator I hired, Camille, wept the first time we installed a portrait of her late grandmother in the hallway near the second-floor lounge. The Whitmore had become more than just a hotel. It was alive. It held stories now. It whispered truths in its woodwork, hummed strength through its lighting, and healed people in invisible ways. People walked in broken and left remembering who they were. I knew because I had done it myself. And yet, as much as I had reclaimed, I found myself wondering, what now? What does a woman do when she's no longer surviving? When revenge has been served and the hurt no longer burns? Who does she become when there's no one left to fight but herself? One afternoon, I found my answer. It came in the form of a letter, slipped into a cream envelope with no return address, resting on my desk like a forgotten prayer. The handwriting was neat, careful. Inside was a handwritten note that said, "Jasmine, I don't know you, but I watched what you did. Not just the hotel. The way you carried yourself. The way you showed grace and fire at the same time. I've been stuck in a marriage that's slowly choking the air out of me. Watching you reminded me that I still have choices, that I'm not powerless, that I don't have to stay small to keep someone else comfortable. Thank you for existing loudly." A sister who's starting over. I sat there, letter trembling in my hand, chest tight. She didn't sign her name, but she didn't have to. I knew her, I'd been her, I was her, and in that moment, I realized that my story wasn't just mine to hold anymore. It belonged to all of us, so I decided to expand, not just the Whitmore, but the entire mission. I took a meeting with my accountant, then my lawyer, then my branding strategist. 3 weeks later, I launched a new venture, the Rising Room. It was a foundation, a mentorship hub, a physical and digital space dedicated to women, particularly Black women, who were starting over after financial ruin, divorce, betrayal, or heartbreak. We offered grants for small businesses. We offered therapy stipends. We hosted workshops on financial literacy, emotional boundaries, and how to rebuild when you've been stripped to your bones. And every month, we held private dinners on the Whitmore rooftop for women to come together, share their stories, and remind one another that they were not alone. The first dinner had 6 women. The second had 18. By the 4th month, we had a wait list of over 200. I sat at every single one, not as a speaker or expert, but as a witness. I listened as women from all walks of life, teachers, lawyers, stay-at-home moms, entrepreneurs, unpacked their pain and reshaped it into possibility. Some were raw. Some were still bleeding. Some had just signed divorce papers that morning, but all of them came with one thing in common: they wanted to rise. And we made sure they did. One woman, Sharnis, launched her own hair care line with a microgrant from our foundation and got picked up by a local boutique within 6 weeks. Another, Clarissa, had been silent for years after surviving emotional abuse. After 3 dinners and 2 therapy sessions we sponsored, she started hosting public readings of her poetry at bookstores across Atlanta. This was bigger than me now. The Whitmore had become the heart, but the Rising Room became the soul. And Marcus, he faded into the background, exactly where he belonged. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that he tried to rebrand himself as a business coach online. He even wrote a LinkedIn post about learning from failure. I didn't read it. I didn't care. His narrative was no longer my concern. He had written his chapter in my book, and I had already turned the page. What mattered now was the work. What mattered now was the future. And I was starting to dream again. Big. I began scouting locations for a second property, this time in Charleston. Then New Orleans. Places where culture thrived but ownership didn't always reflect it. I wanted to create havens, places curated by us, for us, where excellence wasn't rare, it was expected. Where Black women walked in and saw themselves not just represented, but centered. Every time I opened a door to one of those potential properties, I could see it: art on the walls, jazz in the air, softness in the details, strength in the structure. It wasn't just business anymore. It was ministry. I once thought Marcus was my forever. But maybe he was just the fire. And I was the phoenix. Legacy doesn't announce itself. It doesn't walk into a room in heels or ride on applause. It whispers, it lingers. It grows in quiet places, in the roots of things, in the people who feel your presence long after you've gone. I used to think legacy came from making the biggest splash, being the most talked about name in the room, turning pain into empire so publicly no one could deny your shine. But after everything I'd survived, after Marcus, after the fall, after the rebuilding, I learned the truth. Legacy isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a gentle ripple, a soft touch, the echo of a choice you made years ago that gives someone else the courage to do the same. By the time the Rising Room had been operating for nearly a year, the noise around my name had dimmed. The articles slowed. The internet moved on, as it always does. The novelty of the woman who bought the hotel her husband cheated in wore off. And honestly, I was glad. I never wanted to be viral. I wanted to be valuable. I wanted what I built to last. The foundation, the hotel, the women's dinners, the financial workshops, the expansion properties in Charleston and New Orleans. Those were my legacy. Quiet, steady, powerful in ways that didn't need to be shouted. The Whitmore had become more than a boutique destination. It was now a landmark, part of cultural tours, featured in travel blogs for its focus on Black luxury and community-minded design. I'd hired a team of women, most of whom had stories like mine, divorcees, survivors, dreamers who had been told no too many times. I didn't just give them jobs, I gave them space to lead. The general manager, a brilliant woman named Imani, had once run 5-star resorts for white-owned hospitality chains and been passed over for every promotion. Now she had a full staff under her, and the freedom to build her own systems. Watching her thrive reminded me that power is never truly yours unless you're using it to pull someone else up. One particularly quiet Thursday morning, I was sitting in the rooftop garden, watering a new patch of lavender I'd planted myself. It had become a ritual, something grounding, earthy, alive. I'd traded my stilettos for gardening gloves, my boardroom tone for silence. As I clipped brown edges from the stems, I felt a weight in my chest I hadn't recognized at first. Not sadness. Not even exhaustion. It was a kind of fullness. Like a balloon rising so gently you only realize it's airborne when you're already looking down at the earth. My mother used to tell me, "Baby, when you stop chasing, things start coming to you." That morning, something came to me. I didn't need more. Not more headlines, not more properties, not even more applause. What I needed now was meaning. After all the fire I'd walked through, all the reclaiming, all the rebuilding, I was finally at a place where I didn't need to prove anything. Not to Marcus. Not to Atlanta. Not even to myself. I had done the impossible and made it look effortless. But now it was time to stop performing survival and start living deliberately. That meant something hard. Saying no to things I thought I wanted. I turned down a reality show deal that would have followed me as I opened the Charleston property. The producers promised exposure, but I saw what they were really after. Drama, spectacle, commodified trauma. I smiled and said thank you, then walked away. I also pulled back from social media. I let my team run the Rising Room page, but I deleted my personal accounts. I no longer needed validation in likes and shares. Let the world tell its own stories. I was writing my own, in peace. But perhaps the biggest shift came one night, at a Rising Room dinner. It was fall, a crisp wind in the air, candles flickering. Around the long oak table on the rooftop were 22 women, all at different stages of healing. Some had just left bad marriages. Others had closed failing businesses or walked away from toxic jobs. A few were still trembling at the edges of their new beginnings. I sat quietly, just listening, as a woman named Ayanna shared her story. She was soft-spoken, barely above a whisper, but her words hit like thunder. "I thought," she said, "that healing would come with a finish line. Like, I would arrive. One day, I'd just be okay. But what I've learned is it doesn't come like that. It's not one moment. It's every morning you choose not to shrink, every time you speak up when your voice shakes. Every day you decide to still believe in joy, even when your body's tired of hoping." The table fell silent, not because no one had anything to say, but because everyone understood. We didn't need to fill the air with platitudes. Her truth had settled into the center of the table like another dish being passed around. After the dinner, she found me as I was cleaning up plates. "I just want to thank you," she said, eyes glassy but steady. "Not because you made it, but because you didn't let what happened to you define you." I smiled, my throat tight. Truth is, it did define me. For a while. But I chose to rewrite what that definition meant. She nodded, then asked a question that caught me off guard. "So who are you now?" I paused. It was a deceptively simple question. But in that moment, something unlocked. Not just the answer, but the permission to ask it of myself. That night, I wrote in my journal, "I am no longer the wife. I am no longer the woman who was left. I am no longer the builder of empires from ashes. I am no longer vengeance wrapped in lipstick. I am simply me, a woman, a creator, a nurturer of space, a listener, a home." It took me 37 years, a shattered marriage, a stolen bank account, and a hotel rebirth to arrive at that truth. But I was here now, whole, and I realized the legacy I wanted to leave behind wasn't made of marble or millions. It was made of moments, of safe spaces, of women rediscovering themselves in my presence, of truth. Several months later, the Whitmore quietly hosted a private weekend retreat. No press. No influencers, just 30 black women, writers, artists, business owners, mothers, gathered to pour into each other. It was my idea, inspired by a dream I'd had where women were walking barefoot through a candle-lit hall, sharing stories like sacred offerings. We called it the homecoming. No one promoted it. We didn't need to. Word traveled like gospel. On the final night, I stood at the top of the marble staircase that once represented my fall, and looked down at the women laughing, toasting, hugging. I realized in that moment that I was no longer the center of the story. I wasn't the phoenix anymore. I was the nest. The safe space where other women could set their pain down and remember how to fly. That's what Marcus could never understand. You can take a woman's money. You can even take her name, but you cannot take her fire. And if she survives it, she becomes something far more dangerous than a scorned ex. She becomes a mirror. A reminder of what she rose from. A warning to the next man who thinks destruction will stop her. A blueprint for the women who come after her. Legacy isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet rooftop garden in Atlanta, where lavender grows wild, and a woman in soft linen waters her dreams in silence, knowing full well that everything she touched bloomed, long after the world stopped watching. Legacy isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet rooftop garden in Atlanta, where lavender grows wild, and a woman in soft linen waters her dreams in silence, knowing full well that everything she touched bloomed, long after the world stopped watching. And maybe that's the lesson in all of this. Maybe the moral isn't about revenge, or even redemption. Maybe it's not about teaching someone a lesson or proving your worth after they tried to erase it. Maybe the real power lies in choosing yourself, every day, without apology, in knowing that your value is not determined by who stays or who leaves, by what you've lost or what you've rebuilt, but by the fact that you still stand, that you still rise, that you still believe, in love, in joy, in yourself. Because when the storm passes and the smoke clears, when the noise fades and the crowd moves on, all that's left is you. You, and the quiet strength that carried you through. You, and the life you chose to build from the rubble. You, and the legacy you leave behind, not in headlines, but in hearts. Lesson we learn from this story: you can't control who breaks you, but you can choose what you build after. And sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's transformation.